Welcome to a thrilling showcase of chess mastery, where we'll dive into 5 of the most jaw-dropping, legendary sacrifices ever played. Don't go anywhere, because by the end, I have an extra special treat lined up. This game is from the World Championship match between Anatoly Karpov and his challenger Garry Kasparov. Prior to this game, Kasparov was trailing by 1 point, so what better time to make a crushing queen sacrifice to tie the score? Kasparov starts d4 as we enter the 3 knights variation of the Nimzo-Indian Defence. Before you can blink, black is castled. Then white creates an annoying pin on the knight. c5 intends to provoke pawn weaknesses, and after a few moves, black is able to forcefully produce a white isolated pawn. Now this position is double-edged. Admittedly, white has the weakness, but the isolated d-pawn, aka the isolani, can sometimes serve as a catalyst for attacks. Other times, white plays for a d5 pawn break when the moment is right. Black develops and white castles, unpinning the knight, so it now supports the d5 advance. Black takes inspiration as he unpins his own knight, foiling white's plans for now. White introduces the rook, and with the e-pawn in its way, b6 plans to activate the bishop in a different manner. a3 gives space to the white light-squared bishop, and with no more pin on the knight, the dark-squared bishop finds a new home on g3 where it can be more useful. Black plays rook c8, opening some potential discovered attacks, so white takes no risks. At this point, the d5 advance is coming and there's not much black can do to stop it. Knight a5 would invite knight e5 and Kasparov is cruising. So black plays bishop d6 and we see d5 followed by mass exchanges. Then white adds a new attacker on c6, defends his bishop, and reroutes the queen to g4. Black doubles his rooks, then white plays a fantastic move. See if you can find it along with the continuation. So the title and thumbnail definitely gave it away, which is why I also asked for a follow-up plan. Kasparov plays queen takes d7, sacrificing the queen. After the recapture, rook e8 check forces Karpov's king to h7, where it becomes a target for the white bishop and a discovered attack is opened on the rook. Black resigns since white is getting not only 2 rooks for the queen, but a minor piece as well. The bishop has a single safe square. White would take the knight, and it can't be recaptured because of checkmate. In this one, Botvinnik sets up an early attack and completes it with a tremendous rook sacrifice. What's even more impressive? It wasn't just any game. He was facing Paul Carey's in round 10 of the World Championship. Botvinnik begins d4, and we enter the Nimzo-Indian Defence. Black castles, then white forces the bishop to decide its purpose in life, which is to double pawns. Black plays rook e8, preparing a central advance, and white maneuvers his knight to g3, where he'll have a kingside presence long term. Now black avoids undoubling white's pawns, choosing d6 to maintain the tension. Bishop e7 prepares the castle, and knight b to d7 develops while keeping more central breaks possible. c5, trying to provoke either a capture, leaving white with dreadful pawns, or pawn weaknesses in the center. Now never play f3 unless you're a former world champion. This supports a pawn on e5, and as we will soon see, proves to be very useful. There is one capture on d4, followed by knight b6 targeting c4. After bishop b2, black captures on d4 again. Now a recapture is exactly what black wants. d5 would follow, leaving the d4 pawn weak, and white just activated his bishop, only for it to be shut down. So instead, e4. The d4 pawn is going nowhere. Carey's was trying so hard to create weaknesses in white's camp, only to be the one walking away with all the weak pawns in the world. Bishop e6 develops with tempo, rook c1 defends, rook e7 is dubious but has purpose, maybe to double rooks on the c-file, or the e-file. However, black's plans are too slow. Botvinnik lunges with c5, attacks the queen, and plays the calm bishop c1. The queen retreats to where she and the rook can watch the festivities from afar, and oh boy, things are about to get interesting. The rook swings over to g5, threatening the knight with the g7 pawn now pinned. Best for black is knight e8, but it's still difficult to hold after knight h5. Instead, knight b to d7 guards the knight, but Botvinnik has a knockout blow. Can you find it and the continuation? Best move? The ravishing rook takes g7. The king recaptures, producing a pin on the knight, and now knight h5 is ever so powerful. Carey's plays king g6, saving the knight, and Botvinnik quietly shifts the queen to e3. Black resigns because he can, at best, delay one of several checkmates for so long. In this game, Richard Rapport rips open the kingside for a devastating attack. Peter Svidler was the victim, and he certainly did not see it coming. Rapport starts d4, and as you already know, as soon as g6 is on board, h4 is the response. c5 chips away the long diagonal, and d5 gains space. Then b5 is played in Benko Gambit style. The move undermines White's overextended center. White accepts one pawn, but not the other. e3 opens the light squared bishop's eyes. Both sides develop, then White plays a4 to support b5. Bishop b7 adds an attacker to d5, knight f3, and e6 signaling that time's up for the d5 pawn. White can't support it any longer, so takes on e6. Black probably should have recaptured with the d-pawn, but still he gets an isolated pawn on c5. Instead, White is allowed to firmly plant a queen on d6 where it cramps Black's position, and she's going nowhere. A couple exchanges on b5 is followed by knight e4. Due to the double attack, White is forced to take on e4 and the bishop recaptures. With less space, Svidler is happy to exchange pieces, but he overlooked something. The knight was a key defender of the king. Little by little, Richard Rapport's pieces will march up the board, and it all starts with h5. Black really should develop his queenside, but plays queen f6, trying to bring pieces to the king's aid. White goes for h6, bishop h8, then the rook goes up to go over and become a rover. Try saying that 10 times fast. Svidler takes on f3 and we see rook f4. The queen retreats, and I'll be surprised if anyone finds the winning move here. Give it a try. Rapport plays, bishop takes d7. He sacrifices the bishop to remove the vital defender of the e6 pawn. Black resigns, since any way you have it, the bishop can't be captured. This is the best possible continuation for Black, but he ends up being down 3 pawns and in loads of trouble. I remember watching this one live and it was mind-blowing. Anish Giri starts d4 and Jan Nepomniachtchi responds knight f6. We see c4, e6, and to prevent his knight getting pinned on c3, White doesn't put it there just yet. However, now that d5 is played, we are no longer in Nimzo-Indian territory, so the knight hops to c3. c5 marks the semi-Tarrasch defense in the queen's gambit. There's a series of exchanges. What's left is a massive white pawn center, but Black can claim the d4 pawn is weak. Black plays bishop b4 check, intending to exchange bishops, then he castles and White soon follows suit. b6 and d5 thrusting in the center. Black occupies the now unguarded c5 square. Rook fd1 and White gains an isolated pawn. Queen d6 blockades, queen d4 centralizes, bishop b7, rook a to d1, rook a to e8, and knight e5 advancing the knight. a6 prevents any nuisances, a3, rook e7, and rook e3 is a weird move, but you'll see its purpose soon. Black doubles his rooks, and now White has a game-changing plan. I'll be shocked if anyone gets this through to the end. Can you find it? It begins knight takes f7 attacking the queen, and at last we see the rook on e3 won't be captured with check. Different story had it been on e1. The king captures, then White has one and only one winning move, all others being dead lost. Rook e6. If we had a capture of the rook, then this check would come with a discovered attack on the defenseless queen. In game we had queen d8, then queen f4, king g8, a pair of rooks are exchanged on e7, and the killer, d6. Nepo miserably blocks check with the rook, Giri's pawn marches forward, and after White plays rook d6, Black resigns. The queen is stuck supervising the pawn, and White will win a decisive amount of material. In this game, Hikaru Nakamura savagely hunts the enemy king, leading to a hasty victory. His opponent? None other than former World Championship challenger Veselin Topalov. Hikaru is White as we enter the Vienna game. Black plays c6 to cover the d5 square, and White preemptively drops the bishop back to b3. Very Fischer-esque. d6, knight f3, and if the immediate bishop g4, then White is delighted to push his pawns since he hasn't yet committed his king to the kingside. So Black castles instead, and now h3 allowing White to castle in one piece. Then black vacates the c5 square for his knight. In anticipation, white plays a3 so that knight c5 can be met with bishop a2. Black routes the knight to e6, eyeing up some juicy squares, but white wants none of that. Rook e8 is followed by bishop e3 with the idea that once the bishop is captured, the pawn can take over the role of boxing out the enemy knight. Black plays queen c7 and white's knight jumps to h4 with f5 in mind. Then queen d8 with some discovered attack threats on the knight. Hikaru must have seen a ghost because he returned his knight to f3. After bishop d7, white plays knight g3, believing the other knight is more suitable for f5. Then g6, cutting out any of these plans. However, dark square weaknesses have been created near the king. White breaks in the center with d4 and black plays queen c7, indirectly guarding e5, but relinquishing defense of his knight. Knight h4 opens up a discovered attack. Queen d8 defends, and queen f3 adds more fuel to the fire. Black plays the miserable king g7, and Hikaru responds with a marvelous move. Knight h to f5. If the king dodges check, then knight takes d6 leads to the win of a piece. So Topalov captures the knight and meets knight f5 with king g6. After bishop takes e6, black resigns. Had it continued, black would have to give back the material, and white could simplify to an endgame where he's up 2 pawns. Meanwhile, black's king would soon be in a world of hurt.
This is a small story about a game played by Paul Morphy, with not just one adversary, but 2 men of the bourgeoisie. Will noble Duke Karl and aristocrat Count Isouard survive? It's a night at the opera, and it starts e4, e5. Morphy plays knight f3 and black d6, Philidor's defense. White strikes with d4 and tension in the center is immense. What follows is a pin on the knight to the invaluable queen, then the pawn captures on e5 with an infallible scheme. If a recapture, then white exchanges a queen for a queen, freeing the knight who gobbles a pawn like his fine cuisine. So black takes on f3, inviting the white queen to the game. A rush of relief, materials even, that's the rival's claim. A new piece emerges as white poses a complex question. The bishop and queen converge at the soft point that is f7. Black knight to f6 obstructs the queen's line of sight, so the white queen jumps to b3, flaunting its divine might. A double attack on 2 puny pawns, you can only keep one, yet Morphy rejects the material. The assault has just begun. Black leaps at the opportunity to keep the game within reach, meanwhile white's infantry are almost completely unleashed. Black plays the bold b5, maybe they caught white slacking, but to their shock, white captures the pawn, a knight sacking. The bishop makes first contact with the enemy king, check. Black scuffles and soon winds up in a bewildering wreck. White trades rook for knight, then the final piece joins the fight. Black tries to untangle, but of course Morphy does not bite. Bishop captures rook, knight recaptures, then queen b8. She won't die in vain. 2 remain. Rook d8, checkmate.